Titan League, Chapter 1, Absent Friends.
A month had passed since the tragic death of Wally West, known to the world as Kid Flash. The team was in disarray, and Dick Grayson, also known as Nightwing, had left work alone once more in the shadows of Bloodhaven. Despite the passage of time, a gnawing suspicion lingered in Dick's mind about the circumstances surrounding his friend's death. It was here, in a dimly lit apartment with only the glow of 4 computer screens piercing the darkness, that our story begins. Dick sat hunched over his work, eyes flicking between the screens. One displayed a detailed map of the Arctic, another showed an image of Happy Harbor. A third screen had a flat line wavelength with the label Kid Flash Frequency in the top corner, while the last screen held a photograph of Dick, Wally, and Aqualad, capturing a moment of camaraderie and friendship. 1 month has passed, and I still can't seem to find you, Wally. Artemis is doing okay. She jumped right back into the hero business, Dick murmured, his eyes lingering on the photo. The silence in the room was suddenly shattered by a burst of static. Dick's eyes widened as he turned towards the screen with the frequency display. The needle spiked erratically. He leaned closer, heart pounding as he tried to decipher the sudden surge of activity. "What the?" he muttered under his breath. The static grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with its relentless buzz. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to respond. But before he could act, the static cleared, and a familiar voice broke through. "Dick, I am not dead! I am trying to come back!" Wally's voice was unmistakable, piercing through the static like a beacon in the dark. Dick's eyes widened in shock, his heart leaping at the sound of his friend's voice. He felt a surge of emotions, hope, disbelief, relief, and confusion all at once. He reached for the keyboard, hands trembling, desperate to respond. Wally, is that you?" he shouted, but the static intensified, drowning out his voice. He slammed his fist on the desk, frustration and desperation etched on his face. The needles on the frequency display spiked wildly. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. The static ceased, and the room plunged into an eerie quiet, leaving only the soft hum of the computers. In Star City, Artemis Croc, known as Tigress, was in hot pursuit of a thug down a darkened street. The night air was thick with tension as her boots pounded the pavement, each step bringing her closer to the fleeing criminal. Her eyes were sharp, her breath steady, every muscle in her body coiled and ready to strike. The thug, a scruffy man with a panicked look on his face, glanced back over his shoulder, only to see Tigress gaining on him. Determined. "Give it up!" Artemis shouted, her voice echoing through the narrow alleyways. The thug skidded around a corner, knocking over trash cans in a desperate attempt to slow her down. But Artemis leaped over the obstacles with ease, her agility unmatched. Just as she was about to close the gap and tackle her target, a brilliant flash of white light engulfed the entire street, blinding her momentarily. She skidded to a halt, her senses on high alert. Out of the blinding light, a swirling blue vortex materialized right in front of her, its edges crackling with energy. The air around her seemed to hum with power. Artemis's heart raced, but she stood her ground, her eyes wide with both awe and determination. The thug took advantage of the distraction, slipping away into the shadows. But she barely noticed. Her focus was entirely on the vortex. For a fleeting second, as the vortex pulsed and spun, she was overwhelmed by an intense feeling of love, a warmth that filled her to the core. It was as if Wally himself was there, wrapping her in an embrace she had yearned for since his death. The sensation was powerful and all-consuming. Artemis's mind flashed with memories of Wally, his laugh, his smile, the way he made her feel invincible. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, regaining her composure. The vortex began to waver, the blue light dimming. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing the edge of the phenomenon just as it vanished, leaving her standing alone in the now eerily silent street. Breathing heavily, Artemis looked around, her mind racing. What just happened? The overwhelming sense of love still lingered, a ghostly echo of Wally's presence. She clenched her fists, determination burning in her chest. "Wally, if that was you, I'm going to find you, she whispered into the night, her resolve stronger than ever. With renewed purpose, she turned and sprinted back the way she came, ready to share what she had experienced with the only person who might understand, Dick Grayson.
Pardon me, but can I ask you a question? Do you love comic books, but you just don't have the time to read them? Well, do I got a podcast for you. Nerds Through Comics, presented by the Red Cornish Ranger, takes present and some old comics and adapts them into an audio drama for you, the listeners, to enjoy. So, if you love comics as much as I do, go check out Nerds Through Comics on all your podcast stations.
Back in Dick's apartment,
Wally! Wally, is that you?
he shouted, but the static intensified, drowning out his voice. He slammed his fist on the desk, frustration and desperation etched on his face. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what had just happened. His mind raced with possibilities. Could it really be Wally? If so, how? Why? He replayed the voice in his mind, the certainty in Wally's tone. I am not dead. I am trying to come back. The words echoed in his head, igniting a spark of determination. He couldn't ignore this. If there was even the slightest chance that Wally was alive, he had to act. Without wasting another moment, Dick began typing furiously, cross-referencing data, searching for any anomaly, any clue that might explain the message. His eyes darted across the screens, scanning for patterns, for answers. The minutes ticked by, but he was relentless, driven by the hope that his friend was out there somewhere, trying to reach him. He continued his frantic search, the hope of finding Wally pushing him to his limits. The thought of seeing his friend again, of hearing Wally's laugh and seeing his smile, fueled his determination. He knew that this was just the beginning, and he was ready to do whatever it took to bring Wally back. An hour later, Artemis stood outside Dick's apartment door, hesitating. Come on, girl. All you gotta do is knock. After all, he was your teammate, too, she encouraged herself. Finally, she raised her hand and knocked lightly. Guess he's not home, she began, but the door swung open to reveal Dick Grayson standing there, with a welcoming smile. I had a funny feeling you'd show up sooner or later, Dick said. Something strange happen? Artemis asked, stepping inside as Dick moved aside. The apartment was a typical bachelor pad, clothes and old wrappers strewn about. It was evident that Dick had been sleeping on the couch. Dude, I thought you were seeing Corey again, Artemis remarked, eyeing the mess. Dick smiled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. I am. We mostly spend time at the tower, he replied. How are the Teen Titans? I haven't been there since Jamie and Virgil joined, Artemis said, plopping down on the couch. They're all fine. Victor's a good leader for them, as long as he can handle Damien, Dick said, settling into a white recliner next to her. But we both know that's not why you came here tonight. It's about Wally, isn't it? Artemis' expression turned serious. Wally? I don't know what happened tonight, but how could it be Wally, Dick? Okay, why don't you tell me what happened? Dick asked calmly. I was on the trail of some low-level thug running guns in Star City, and out of nowhere this blue vortex appears right in front of me. I felt this overpowering sense of being loved. Artemis explained, her voice shaking slightly. And you don't think that has anything to do with Wally? Dick asked, raising an eyebrow. Wally is dead. Are you trying to tell me his ghost was talking to me? Artemis shot back. Dick shook his head and stood up, walking over to his computer desk. He flipped the monitor to show the communication frequency. He told me he's not dead. Just about an hour ago, Dick said. Artemis jumped to her feet, her eyes wide with shock. Hold on. You're telling me the love of my life told you he's not dead? She exclaimed, tears threatening to spill. Yes, Artemis, that's what I'm saying. We better get to work because we're going to find him and bring him back, Dick said with determination. And just how do you plan on doing that? Artemis asked, wiping away a tear. Well, let's see. Who do we know that knows about speedsters? Dick replied, a huge smile spreading across his face. Artemis's eyes widened in realization, and a smile of hope formed on her lips as a single tear of joy fell.
What the hell, Grayson? I don't want to do this.
Come on, Roy. Don't be a jerk.
Fine. My name is Roy Harper, or you might know me as Arsenal. If you're interested in an original story set in the DC and Marvel universes, you need to go to Tiger Tales and listen to War Against Gotham.
And his other channels?
Shut up, Grayson. I'm getting to it. You may also want to go check out his other channels. There, you happy dick.
You could have at least done it with a little bit more enthusiasm.
No, I did it. Now I'm going home.
The next day, Dick and Artemis arrived in Central City, home of the Flash, but that wasn't why they came. Dick pulled his motorcycle into the Star Labs parking lot, with Artemis riding in right behind him. So, if anyone can tell us what really happened to Wally, it's going to be Cisco Ramon, aka Vibe, Dick said, setting his helmet on the seat of his bike. Is this place some kind of museum? Artemis asked, eyeing the building. Yeah, a couple years ago they turned it into one. Don't ask me why, but you can ask Wally when we see him again, Dick replied with a half smile as they headed inside. Once inside, they were greeted by a well-dressed woman. Welcome to the Star Labs Museum, she said politely. Artemis gave a small nod. Hello, Mr. Grayson and Miss Croc, here to see Mr. Ramon, Dick said. The woman smiled and nodded, motioning for them to follow. She led them to an elevator and instructed them to take it down to the basement and no further. They followed the directions, and as the elevator doors opened, Cisco was already waiting. Hey there, Dickie boy. Long time no see, Cisco greeted. Hey, Vibe, you staying whelmed? Dick asked, shaking his hand. You know me, man. 5 by 5, Cisco replied with a grin.
You're binge-watching Buffy again, aren't you? Dick said knowingly.
Cisco just smirked. We came here for a reason, Dick, Artemis cut in. The two men turned toward her and nodded. She's right. We need to ask you some stuff about speedsters, Dick said. Cisco led them into the Cortex, now better known as Team Flash headquarters. So, what do you guys want to know? He asked, sitting down at the main desk. What do you know about what happened to Wally? Artemis asked. Cisco shot a concerned glance at Dick, who simply nodded, signaling it was okay to talk. I know. He was killed when the Reach tried to blow up the Earth. Barry says it's thanks to Wally that we're all alive, Cisco explained. Artemis stared at him, eyes filled with disbelief. You guys don't think he died, do you? Cisco asked slowly. Bingo, baby, Dick said. Cisco jumped to his feet, startling them both. I knew it, he shouted, rushing to a whiteboard. Okay, you lost us. How did you know? Dick asked. My theory is that Kid Flash didn't die that day. He was pulled into the Speed Force, Cisco said, scribbling on the board. Oh my god, why didn't I see that? Dick added, rushing over. Okay, I'm still lost here. The Speed Force is what gives speedsters their powers, right? Artemis asked. Yes, but it's so much more, Cisco said. Once, when Barry lost his powers, we tried to get them back, and he was pulled into the Speed Force. He told us there are beings that live in there. I still don't see what that has to do with Wally, Artemis said. Barry told Wally once that the beings wanted him to live, and they saved him, Dick said. And if my theory is right, Cisco added, they saved Wally too, and he's trying to find his way back. When I was on a case, a blue vortex opened in front of me, Artemis said. And at the same time, Wally's old comlink came online and told me he was alive, Dick added. Just then, Barry Allen, aka the Flash, sped into the Cortex. Artemis, Dick, what are you doing here? Barry asked, then glanced at the whiteboard. Wally is alive? He said, his voice catching. Yeah, we all think so, Bear, Dick said. If he's trapped in the Speed Force, only Artemis can get him out, Barry replied. Why me? Artemis asked. When Barry was stuck, it took Iris's love to pull him out, Cisco said. You just said fully, as in she had help, Dick pointed out. Cisco's powers were the other part, Barry explained. Artemis walked over and placed her left hand on Cisco's shoulder. Can you get me there? She asked, eyes full of determination. Cisco nodded slowly. Sounds like we've got a plan, Dick said. Let's go get our friend back. Thanks to Cisco's powers, the group was quickly transported to the site where Kid Flash had vanished. Everyone was suited up. Why are we here? Tigress asked. For my powers to work best, I need to be near where they were last felt, Vibe explained. It's going to be wild inside the Speed Force, Flash warned. You'll need to focus on Wally. I got it, Tigress said, holding out her hand to Vibe. Vibe took her hand, and as his powers activated, a swirling blue vortex opened. The two were pulled in. We're in, Vibe confirmed. Tigress closed her eyes and placed a hand over her heart, focusing on Wally West, her one true love. As she did, she heard a voice call her name. Wally, I'm here! Come to me! She cried. Slowly, a figure began to form from the swirling winds. I'm coming, Artie, Kid Flash said, his hand reaching out to touch hers. Tigress's eyes flew open. She gripped his hand tightly as tears spilled down her cheeks. Vibe! I've got him! Pull us out! She shouted. As the vortex surged, 3 figures emerged, Vibe, Tigress, and Kid Flash. Everyone rushed forward, surrounding Wally in hugs, but Tigress never let go of his hand. Wally, I'm so sorry I didn't try harder to find you, Barry said. Wally shook his head. Barry, don't blame yourself, man. We all should have looked more, Nightwing said. Guys, stop. No one could have known I wasn't dead, Wally said gently. It doesn't matter, Tigress said, smiling through tears. You're home now, and we can finally go back to our life together. She leaned in and kissed him passionately.
What you have just listened to is a product created by the Three Ranger Bros Studio.
Hosted by 3 cosplaying fathers who
happen to be massive geeks of all sorts of fandoms.
They are Mark, the Red Cornish Ranger,
Cosplay Dude 637,
and Tai Tiger.
The studio covers different types of YouTube videos, TikToks, podcasts, and live streams.
If you wish to find out who cosplays who, the YouTube channels, the TikTok accounts, and the podcasts, and all of the other social media platforms,
please go to the 3rangerbrostudios.com.